Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Divers Ready. My name's James and welcome to this, the next in our little mini series of quick tips videos focused on the Scuba Regulator. If you saw the last quick tips video, you'll know that we were talking about the first stage and we give you some glossary terms and listed the components and what to look for. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper and look at the two major styles or designs, if you like, of first stage, the piston and the diaphragm regulator. So we're going to go through the pros and cons of each, the difference in design and what it means for you and your diving. I'm going to head over to the workbench and get set up. You guys subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. I'll see you over there. Okay, so piston versus diaphragm. Go in any internet chat room and you're going to see this debate rages on for pages and pages and pages of comments, and most of the argument is about which is best. Which should you buy, piston or diaphragm? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic design differences of each. Then we'll talk about the pros and cons of each design, and then I will tell you once and for all, unequivocally, what the best regulator is, in my honest opinion. You ready? This is going to get messy, so let's go for it. First off, you got to understand, as we said in the last video, first stage basics, whether you buy a piston regulator like this Scubapro Mark II or a diaphragm regulator like this Apex XTX50, they both do the same job. They are both designed to reduce cylinder pressure to an intermediary pressure that is then reduced further by the second stage so that you can breathe off of it. It's also going to do the same job when it comes to supplying accurate cylinder pressure to your SPG so you know how much gas you have remaining, and it's going to supply intermediary pressure to your buoyancy compensating device so you can adjust your buoyancy without super inflating your jacket or wing and sending you crashing to the surface. So that being said, they both do the same job. Why do we need two different designs? Well, what are the two different designs to start with? Let's start then with the piston regulator. As I said, this is a Scubapro Mark II. Inside the cap end here is the piston head, which is about 1 inch in diameter and has an O-ring around the outside of it. And then in the middle of that piston, there is a 1/4 inch needle or stem that has a high pressure seat at one end. That high pressure seat is designed to move up and down because the piston is mounted on a heavy duty spring. So what happens when you take a breath, let's say there's a second stage mounted off of here, we're attached to the cylinder here, the tank pressure is on, we take a breath, the pressure in the intermediary pressure chamber drops because we're breathing in. That then moves the piston back to allow gas through the high pressure seat orifice into the IP chamber and reset ready for your next breath. That is essentially the function of a piston regulator, and the beauty of that design is there is only one moving part, and that is the piston itself on the spring mount. The pros of the piston design are they are incredibly simple, there's only one moving part, they're incredibly durable, you can drag this across a sandy beach and it's just going to keep on working, and from a service technician point of view, they are incredibly easy to service. You could do this with your blindfold. I mean, we used to use Mark IIs as our rental regulator in the Caribbean. I had 24 sets of them and I could just, yeah, I'd be like Forrest Gump with a rifle. I could just take it apart with my bare hands, blindfolded, and service it and put it back together in an hour. Really easy. But the disadvantage of a piston style regulator is that the spring is exposed. If you look in that little gap there, you can actually see the spring is exposed. So if you were diving in icy cold water, that has the potential to freeze up, ice up that spring and trap the piston in the open position, which could cause a catastrophic free flow. So not great for cold water diving, but if you're running a dive center or if you've been diving at a recreational dive center in the Caribbean and you rented a regulator, the chances are it was a piston because of the simplicity, durability of the design. Let's move over and talk about the diaphragm then. The first thing you're going to notice is it's a sealed body design. Yes, I've got the port plugs off, but when you've got a hose in there, it's a sealed body design. So there's no water getting on the inside, which means you're not getting any contaminants on the inside of your first stage regulator, and the chance for freezing is a lot lower. So for cold water divers, generally they prefer diaphragm regulators. The disadvantages are there are a lot more moving parts. They're a lot more complicated in design, they're harder to maintain, that's for sure. You have a diaphragm on the inside that's held in place by a series of different rings. You have 2 springs, 2 needles on each side that are controlling the motion of that diaphragm. So they're just a little bit more complex. All right, let me just satiate something that you're going to read in internet chat rooms if you're looking to buy a regulator that, whilst maybe factually accurate, is completely irrelevant, and that is that they'll tell you diaphragm regulators do not have as high an air delivery flow potential as piston regulators. And while that may be factually true for most brands, you've got to remember this. It's the old analogy of driving a car. If you've got a car that can go max speed 150 miles an hour and another car that can go max speed of 200 miles an hour, it doesn't matter if the speed limit is 65 miles an hour, which is how fast you can breathe. Both of these regulators provide more than enough gas for any diver to consume. You're never going to be struggling for breath with either of these options, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, so now it's time for me to answer the ultimate internet question. Which is better, piston or diaphragm regulator? Are you ready? Drum roll please. The answer is neither. Of course neither. Neither one is better than the other one, and I can prove it to you without any hesitation at all. Are you ready? Some manufacturers specialize in one design or the other. Apex, for example, is very strongly a diaphragm regulator because they grew up in cold water climates in England. But let's put that aside for a second and talk about Scubapro as a brand, because Scubapro is a good example of a regulator manufacturer that makes both diaphragm regulators and piston regulators. Why do they do that? It would be so much easier if they just picked one or the other and made that regulator for the rest of their life. Well, Scubapro recognized that, there isn't one design better than the other, and they need to make both to serve different designs. And one thing that Alex Pierce said in one of his videos on the subject was that diaphragm regulators are more expensive than piston regulators because they have more parts. That's kind of true, but it's an overgeneralization, because if you look at the Scubapro range of regulators, the cheapest regulator they make, the Mark II, and the most expensive regulator they make, the Mark 25, are both piston regulators. And then in the middle you have the 11s and the 17 and the Mark 21 that are all diaphragm regulators. So it's not as cut and dry of, well, diaphragms are more expensive than pistons. It just depends on the additional features being offered. So then the only question remaining is, which should you buy, piston or diaphragm? Well, I've given you the pros and cons of each now, so it's really down for you to decide which is right for you, based on the style of diving you usually do. Remember, they both do the same job. They both take tank pressure down to intermediary pressure. So if that pressure in your hose is 135 psi or 14 bar or 15 bar or 12 bar, whatever your regulators are designed for, it's still delivering the same pressure and it's doing the same job. So the argument there is kind of mute, but there are other features that you want to be looking at. In the next video, we're going to be talking about balanced versus unbalanced, what those terms mean and what they mean when you pick your next regulator. So until then, my name's James. Thank you so much for watching as always. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in the next video. Dive safe, dive often, guys.